plunged into the sea in a fit of despair and wilfully destroyed himself for the mystery of them.
Up to this point, he's been very bold. In 1616, he had in fact circulated, given to some cardinals, a tract on the tides in which he argued that this is actual physical proof that the earth moves.
He does think, enthusiastically think, passionately think, that he has the key here to prove, to demonstrate the Earth's motions by turning to the motions of the tides. Now, we know that that is in fact incorrect, but he thought he had it.
For once, Galileo's intuition failed him. Although a link between the tides and the phases of the moon had been observed for centuries, Galileo rejected the idea. For him, the suggestion that the moon could influence events on Earth smacked of astrology or the occult. The search for physical proof of the Earth's rotation would take another 200 years.
I don't know. What a beautiful expression that is. So candid in its honesty. Much better than the occult explanations offered by certain philosophers. The number of people that can reason well is much smaller than those that can reason badly. If reasoning were like hauling rocks, then several reasoners might be better than one, but reasoning isn't like hauling rocks. It's like racing. A single galloping Barbary steed easily outruns 100 wagon-pulling horses.
If, like a galloping steed, the Earth is hurtling through space, why can't we feel the movement? Galileo seized on the paradox that the Earth could spin on its axis fast enough to cause day and night without people sensing the motion.
What is really exciting about Galileo, and you see it exactly the same in Einstein too, was the way he picked up what seemed to be an absolute impossibility. He said, we have this incredibly strong evidence that the Earth is not moving. Everything that our senses tell us is that the Earth is not moving. And yet Copernicus has got these rather strong arguments from astronomy to suggest that the Earth is moving. So then Galileo says, well, this actually should tell us something very deep about how nature works.
So he devised an intriguing thought experiment. He used a horse to represent the motion of the Earth. If a rider dropped a ball while standing still, the ball would, of course, fall straight down, landing beside the horse. But what would happen if the same rider dropped the ball with the horse at full gallop? In Galileo's experiment, the forward motion of the horse would be communicated to the ball through the rider's hand. As the ball dropped, it would continue to move forward and would still land beside the horse, just as it had done when the horse stood still. To Galileo, when the horse and the ball shared the same motion, it was as if the motion did not exist. If the Earth were moving, could we be carried along with it and not be conscious of its motion?
There is a sort of a principle of relativity where if you're sort of moving with the Earth, everything shares the same motion. Not only is the Earth moving, but I'm sharing that motion as well. And therefore it is all hidden. It was probably the first really great thought experiment in physics. In fact, he was so confident of the result, he never even bothered to do the experiment to show it was right.
Despite his troubles with the church, Galileo was still well supported by the Medicis. He moved closer to his daughter, to a hillside villa outside of Florence.
Florence is surrounded by these hills, And Arcetri, like the others, was a place where the wealthy families of Florence would have their villas. There were also normal farmhouses, there were convents. It was relatively difficult to get into town. And when the daughter of Galileo was in a convent nearby, down there, and she also found for the father a location next to the convent where he had fields, he had olive oil. The daughter was also telling him that it was producing wine, but that he should not drink too much wine.
Maria Celeste is extraordinary in every way. She lives in this cloister. She is cut off from the world, and yet she has her hands in everything. The real estate market, the foods, the small favors, the laundry. She never did lose her sense of being a dutiful Italian daughter.
The aging Galileo constantly complained of terrible ailments.
I find this very thin, cold air in Florence to be most cruel to my head and to all the rest of my body. Constipation, discharge of blood, colds. Over the last 3 months, left me in such a state of despair. I'm practically confined to my room. No, to my bed, without the benefit of either sleep or rest.
Somehow, Galileo's every passing need, his ailments, his interests were known to his daughter behind her convent walls.
Most illustrious Lord Father, please do not forget the grave condition you are in, and have a little more love for yourself than for the garden. In this season of Lent, make this one sacrifice, if only for me. Deprive yourself for a time of the pleasure of the garden.
Sacrifice and exhaustion were conditions Sister Maria Celeste knew firsthand.
The convent where Virginia became Maria Celeste was a particularly poor convent. Being a convent of the Poor Clares, it was, of course, committed to poverty. That was their way of life, their chosen way of life. So they expected to have little to eat and to be cold in the winter and to experience harshness in every day's, every moment.
Sire, I assure you that I am never vexed by boredom, but sooner by the hunger, caused, I believe, by the coldness of my stomach, which does not get the full complement of sleep it requires. I only tell you this to excuse myself for the haphazard appearance of my letter, as I was compelled to put down and then take up my pen again more than once before I could complete it.
Maria Celeste is a bright personality. She's in a dark place. There's at least one nun who tries to kill herself in this convent. And yet, Maria Celeste always has a way of seeing the higher purpose, the higher good, that never fails her.
Such graceful submission to the ways of the faith was not a path Galileo would follow. He could never emulate his daughter's obedience to the Church. even under the watchful eyes of the Inquisition. The Church taught that all heavenly bodies were unchanging and pristine. But Galileo's telescope continued to reveal a cosmos quite unlike the officially accepted truth. Even on the bright surface of the sun itself, Galileo observed dark blemishes which he named sunspots. He could not have known that the spots were actually magnetic storms, but his descriptions of